the Penguins will look to get back into the win column tonight against the Montreal Canadiens, and Pat and I are going to preview that game right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. You can follow him on all social media platforms at Synonym for Wet, and you can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen / watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So it's Penguins Canadiens tonight from the Bell Center in Montreal, an arena that I still very badly want to go to someday. There's a few arenas at the top of my bucket list. The Bell Center, right up there. It's an absolutely gorgeous arena. I want to go to Montreal very badly at some point. Hopefully I can make it happen as I get a little bit older here. But this will be the third and final meeting between these two teams this year. The Penguins won the first meeting in Montreal by a score of 6-3. Then they won their only meeting between these two teams in Pittsburgh a little bit later, 3-1, and the Penguins will try to go for the season sweep, just like they did last year. The Penguins are on a 5-game winning streak against the Canadiens right now. They'll try to make it 6 tonight, and this is a Canadiens team that is once again struggling, but I'm not too surprised because they're still rebuilding, They're 11-14-3 this season. That's good for 8th in the Atlantic. They're trying to jumpstart this rebuild. I think they're probably going to get closer to a playoff spot these next couple of years. Even this year, I expect them to maybe be a little bit better, but I'm still not surprised where they are in this inning just because, again, it's a process. You got to keep going through, the steps here to try and get to being a contender. And the Canadiens, they have some good pieces that will eventually be there when they are a contender, but some of their lineup, it's still not the greatest. I mean, again, in terms of the big pieces, Nick Suzuki's awesome. He has 10 goals, 29 points in 28 games this year. Cole Caufield leads the team in goals. He has been on an absolute heater this year. 17 goals, 25 points in 28 games. How Cole Caufield did not make Team USA is beyond me for the Four Nations face-off. If he doesn't make the Olympic roster in 26, I'm going to have to be calling Bill Guerin, Mike Sullivan, and everyone who runs USA Hockey and being like, okay, what the heck is going on here? But, those two forwards up front, very, very good. Leighton Hudson, he is awesome with the puck on his stick. Doesn't have a goal this season, but does have 19 assists, so 19 points in 28 games. He's been a lot of fun. He's got to work out some of the defensive kinks in his own zone, but he is such a treat to watch with the puck on his stick in the offensive zone. Again, I get a little bit of mini Quinn Hughes vibes. Obviously, they have Mike Matheson as well. You go up and down this lineup, Kirby Dach is second line center. Patrick Laine is back. I'm so happy that he is back. By the way, obviously everything he's been through. He had the injury this year as well. Really glad that he's back. You have Brendan Gallagher still there. Josh Anderson, Christian Dvorak. Obviously, again, we already discussed Hudson and Mike Matheson. You have Caden Gooley, David Savard, and then in goal, you have Sam Montembeault and Caden Primo. Montembeault, even on a bad Canadiens team, has actually been at least fine this year. 2.83 goals against average, 906 save percentage. So he's giving them at least average to a bit above average goaltending. This is at least one of the decent goaltenders in this league. But in terms for keys for this game, it's kind of similar to what the Penguins have done in these first two matchups. The Canadiens are not a good defensive team. You saw that on display in those two games. The Penguins were kind of having their way with them in all three zones of the ice. You got to see it similar here. I know the Penguins, again, they're not very good this year, but this is still a team that they should be able to beat.
It is, and it should be, and it would be nice to get a season sweep against a team, even if it is Montreal. But like you said, it's a team that's going through the rebuilding process, and you are starting to see progress in that process. A lot of their younger players are starting to take even bigger steps. You already jumped into Suzuki and Caufield. Hudson has been an absolute revelation. I do have to push back a little bit on that, though. I think the work he needs to do in the defensive zone is clear. I don't think he's a shutdown defenseman yet, but I think it's more just a product of he's on a young rebuilding team, and you're going to have defensive warts just by the fact that it's not a very good team. He isn't a young offensive defenseman who is just playing like a gunslinger. He is producing really well, and you can see that he has the fundamentals to play a good defensive game to go along with it. Might not be to the level of, say, Cale Makar, who we saw a couple nights ago, but it's definitely there. He's not a fourth forward type of offensive defenseman. And I think this kid is going to be at least a little bit in Calder conversations this year. Don't think he's going to win it. I don't know if he'll even make the stage, but it's definitely a discussion that'll be had amongst the writers because he is a very, very talented young kid. Overall, though, you're right about what has to happen tonight. This just has to be a complete 60-minute game because this is a team that's taking some steps. They're young, they're learning, but they still have their warts. And very happy to see what's going on with Patrik Laine. They have absolutely embraced him in Montreal, and I'm so happy to see that he's been able to get over what's been ailing him. And hopefully this is his home. Hopefully this is where he ends up for the rest of his career, and it's a very productive one. And so far, 4 games, 3 goals, 4 points. That's a pretty good start for Laine coming back, especially after the injury he suffered in the preseason. So good to see him back. But overall, like you said, there is a definite gulf on this roster between their most talented players and guys who you can tell are simply placeholders for while they wait for some of their younger talent to develop and be NHL ready, and whoever else they may bring in over the next couple of years.
Right. I mean, and as a team, they've scored only 77 goals this year. 27 of them have come from either Nick Suzuki or Cole Caufield. No one else is even at double-digit goals this season outside of those two. I mean, you have Brendan Gallagher. He's at 8 goals. You know, you have Alex Newhook. He's at 6 goals. So you have some players that can still score. You know, Jake Evans has 5, for example. Josh Anderson has 4. So they have some players that can score, but they need some more high-end talent in this lineup if they really want to take the next step in this rebuild process. You can't have only 2 guys with double-digit goals, you know, halfway through December of a season. You know, that's not good enough for this team. But go
for
ahead.
Sure. And another X factor, I think, for them, and it's very indicative of where their season has been, is Sam Montembeault.
Yeah.
He is extremely up and down. You go to his stat page, you look at his game logs, and I don't want to say that he goes from great to unusable because it's not that bad, but he does go from genuinely great to maybe a little bit below replacement level. It's just fun to look at because they're coming off of a win against the Anaheim Ducks, .931 save percentage. His last start before that, Washington Capitals, one of the hottest teams in the league, .886. And then you go back before that, struggling team, Nashville Predators, shutout, 1,000 save percentage. Then, you know, you go up and down, and he hovers kind of in and around 900 for the majority of the season. So that, I don't know if he's got it in him to continually steal games, but he has kind of been a little bit of a catalyst for this team where, you know, they have their deficiencies, you know, they have their weaknesses, but if it's a night where Montembeault's in the net and he's feeling it, he is definitely going to cover up for some of those weaknesses.
Yeah, he's always been a solid NHL goalie ever since, you know, really getting those minutes. And again, even this year, he has at least a league average save percentage to a little bit above league average save percentage. And this is on one of the worst defensive teams in the league. So the Penguins will have to be ready for Sam Montembeault. And also, this is also a big game, I think, for someone like Sidney Crosby. He loves playing up in Montreal. The Canadiens crowd also very much loves him. Same with Chris Letang. In the 2 wins against the Canadiens this season, the Penguins' best players have been their best players. Crosby has 2 goals in 2 games against them. And then also, you know, Chris Letang, he also has a goal against them. Evgeny Malkin has a goal against them. Rickard Rakell has a goal against them as well. You know, Lars Eller, he had a couple of goals in those games too, even though he's not there anymore. But one of the biggest reasons why the Penguins have won those 2 games is because their best players have outperformed Montreal's best players. So again, I really want to see a nice performance from the big 3 tonight. Erik Karlsson as well. I think Karlsson has been playing a lot better these last couple of weeks, I would say. But for Crosby, his goal scoring total, it's a bit down this year, but he can really take a step forward in getting that back up a little bit with another big performance against Montreal, considering how much he loves playing up there.
Absolutely. And I'll say this about Crosby's goal scoring drought right now. It's something that is a cliche. I've said it plenty of times. When it comes to players like Sid in players in that caliber, my worry begins when they stop getting chances. And Crosby has been getting chances. He is just in a shooting percentage drought right now. The shots are there, the scoring chances are there, and that's both top line counting numbers with shots on goal. And when you dive into the analytics, he's getting high danger chances. He's possessing the puck as much as he usually does. It's just a matter of he's in a drought that every big time player goes through in the NHL. As long as those chances keep coming, I won't get worried, because we have seen the trend of Sidney Crosby's career to this point. Eventually he breaks out of this and he starts scoring, whether it's a couple of goals every few games, or if he gets a 2 to 3 goal performance and then follows it up with 3-4 goals over the next week. I do think the time is going to come where he breaks out of this little slump.
Hey, I hope so, because you're right. He's getting the chances, but I feel like once one goes in, Pat, they're going to start going in bunches, and he's going to have a stretch where maybe he has, 6 goals in 4 games, maybe 7 goals in 5 games, something like that. And everyone's gonna be like, oh, look, guys, he's back to his career average in terms of scoring goals in the league, even though he's a bit older now. But that'll do it for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to get into more of the lineup for tonight. Could we see a couple of changes to the Penguins lineup? Who's starting in goal? And all of that stuff. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about our first sponsor, and that is FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. That's America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And we're not done. We still got to tell you all about another sponsor, and that is Indeed. We're driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate is not to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. It is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show, you will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So, Pat, we could see a small lineup tweak tonight. So this comes courtesy of Taylor Haas of DK Pittsburgh Sports on the Penguins feed. Taylor, one of the top Penguin reporters out there. If you're not following her work, you're doing it wrong at the end of the day. She is fantastic. And she was saying during the morning skate, Ryan Shea, Jesse Puljujarvi, and Kevin Hayes were the last players on the ice. Matt Nieto came off with the other guys. So judging off that, it looks like Matt Nieto might be coming in for Kevin Hayes. And if that is true, and yes, I know we're recording this at 3 o'clock right now. This is not going to be the case once January rolls around, by the way, because Pat's work schedule is changing. So we're going to have these preview episodes out a lot earlier in the day for everyone. But going back to this, if that is the case, I just don't understand why we're just rearranging deck chairs. Why are you scratching both Puljujarvi and Hayes? in bringing in Matt Nieto. I was fine with Nieto his first 2 to 3 games, man. I thought he actually looked like a serviceable NHL bottom 6 player. His skating was very much there. He was penalty killing nicely. He was even forechecking well in the offensive zone. But after those first 2 to 3 games, he looked like a player that had just missed a lot of time and just really wasn't contributing a lot on a nightly basis. I was totally fine with him being scratch tech. I think it probably should have happened a bit sooner. But you're scratching Hayes now for Nieto. And don't get me wrong, I don't think Hayes has been that good either. I get why he's been on the top power play, or at least one of these split power play units, and we'll get into that in just a second as well. But why bring Nieto in for Hayes and potentially scratch Puljujarvi? Again, I know the lineup isn't out yet. We're recording about 4 hours before this game. I just don't get the thought process there.
I got nothing. But I will say this. I don't get the Hayes for Nieto move, because I'll say it this way. Nieto is very quickly moving into the category of cardio merchant, where he's not bad, but he's not good either. He's just kind of a body. He just fills out.
Low-key, Jansen Harkins was kind of that player last year. He was a
right.
He wasn't
that
good.
Comparison. It's not that he's bad. It's also not that he's good. And I think Hayes, at the very least, gives you a little bit more punch in the bottom 6 than Matt Nieto does. Same thing goes for Jesse Puljujarvi. And I understand that there is a process happening with Puljujarvi. I think we're all reading a little too much into the whole, they're working on his game and they don't like certain aspects of his game. I really do think, after thinking about it, that the Puljujarvi thing is entirely health and conditioning related, because, again, I made the joke on the show before, it's not NHL 25 where his name pops off the injury list and his health bar's at 100%. The guy got double hip surgery less than a year ago, or maybe a little over a year ago at this point. But so he is probably not anywhere near completely ready to play an 82-game season. So I get that to an extent, but this switch with Hayes and Nieto, I don't get it.
No, I don't either. I think if you want to make a move for the bottom 6, again, just put Puljujarvi in there. Don't get me wrong, Pat. I understand your point, but I just want them to give him at least a fair runway here to see what he can do. Again, I get that there's a process here, but he's been in and out of the lineup a bit too much for me. So either give him a runway or, just, I don't know, send him to a different team or something like that. I just don't want to keep flip-flopping back and forth here. But he plays one game, he comes out. He plays one game, he comes out. I just don't really think that's going to do anything for his development. I want to see what he can do for another 5 to 6 to 7 game sample size, especially in a third line role, to see what he can do, because he's been a bright spot for the team this year. I just don't get why you have to go with a seasoned veteran over someone who I think A, is better, and B, can be here for a bit longer than, the other player. Again, that's just my opinion. Tristan Jarry will be in net tonight for the Penguins, which I'm not surprised by. He definitely did not have a good start against the Avalanche. We already discussed that third goal, especially, and why he's got to be quicker going side to side. The last time he played in Montreal was this year. The first couple of periods weren't the greatest. I'll say that. He played a really good third period, bounced back a little bit there. I need to see another bounce back here from Jarry. Again, that was a really bad start from him earlier this week, was right around 800 for his save percentage. I get not wanting to start Ned just because he hasn't been good for the last several weeks at this point, but I still need to see Jarry have a much better start here compared to, what we saw earlier this week.
For sure. And this is just the theme of the episode, is process. This is part of the rebuilding Jarry process, is you have to give him the opportunity to bounce back. Now, you can't hold on for dear life and continue to let him have poor starts, but you do have to give him the opportunity on a night like tonight to rebound from that start against Colorado. Because if there were 2 reasons that they lost to Colorado, Colorado's top talent outperformed the Penguins, and Tristan Jarry had a very subpar performance. So part of this process of either rebuilding him and making him your goalie of the next few years, or artificially inflating his value and eventually moving on from him, is you have to give him opportunities to play out of the funk that he's in. And I do think overall in the last month, he has played a lot better. He maybe not to the level we would like him to, maybe not to the level he has shown in years prior before he fell off last season, but the improvements have been there, however marginal. So you give him this start tonight, you see how he does, and I imagine Ned will be between the pipes on Saturday in Ottawa.
Yeah, I can see them going to Ned on Saturday in Ottawa, but I will say if he does have a really good start tonight, Jari, that is, I could see Sullivan kind of riding this out a little bit and be like, okay, I'm going to reward Jari with another start in Ottawa against the Senators team that is also still failing to take that next step this year. They have some good talent up front, but Linus Ullmark just hasn't been playing at the level this year that we saw him play at in Boston under Jim Montgomery, which makes sense. I mean, the Bruins were a better defensive team under Montgomery. When you go to a team like Ottawa, who, is still trying to be a bit better defensively, though this year it's been better than recent years, but it's still not all the way there. It's still an adjustment process. And also Allmark just has to play better. But again, we'll preview that episode for Friday when Pat hosts the show. But I still could see Sullivan rewarding Jari on Saturday if he goes out there and has a really good start tonight against this Canadiens team. But I think
who knows what's going on with Ned right now away from his play, because we didn't really touch on it in our recap of the Colorado game. He got hit in the face with a puck while sitting on the bench, and it cut right under his eye. And yeah, it's a cool little picture where he's got the shiner and the stitches under his eye, but that might be something that hinders him from starting, because you kind of need your eyes to play goal. And if he's having some issues with that, which again, have not heard any reports about it, have not seen them say anything about any injuries or any limitations, but it is just something to keep in the back of your head that he did in fact get hurt while being the backup against Colorado.
Right. No, he did. And you saw that it left a pretty big mark on his cheek right there. So obviously hoping everything is all right with him, but that'll do it for the second segment. Coming up to end the show, Pat and I are going to dive into some news and notes around the Penguins and how a former prospect could be rejoining the organization at some point, either during the season or after the season. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about our final sponsor, and that is Prize Picks. It's the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money sports action while watching your favorite sports. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks, and it's the best way to get action in sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. You can join over 10 million members and sign up today. They also offer MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Join now because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. One more time, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So, Pat, we could be seeing the Penguins reacquiring a former prospect that used to be in the system, and that is Philip Hollander. So this report came out Wednesday morning from Jennifer Engstrom. I believe that's how you pronounce her last name. And she reported that Philip Hollander is getting closer to return to North America, and the Penguins would like to get him, according to her sources. So for people that don't know who Philip Hollander is, so he was the Penguins' second-round pick in 2018. He was traded to the Maple Leafs in the deal that brought back Kasperi Kapanen, and then they reacquired Philip Hollander in 2021 when the Penguins dealt Jared McCann to the Maple Leafs. And then we all know what happened with McCann being selected by Seattle in the expansion draft. And yeah, I don't need to go into how bungled the whole Seattle expansion draft process was. I know it's been a few years, still hate it, but that is the history with Philip Hollander. These last couple of years, he's been spending some time in Sweden, and honestly, he's been putting up some decent numbers. Last season, 14 goals, 36 points in 51 games. This year, already 12 goals, 27 points in 24 games. He's projected to finish the year with 26 goals and 58 points in 51 games. Before that, again, he was with the Penguins organization just because he came back over, in the McCann deal. In 21-22, he had 14 goals, 28 points in 61 games. And then the year after, 11 goals, 33 points in 43 games with Wilkes-Barre. He's played a few games at the NHL level with the Penguins, really hasn't done much of anything. But Pat, what are your thoughts on potentially getting back Hollander? At the very least, it's some organizational depth.
Yeah, it can't really hurt. He's still only 24, which by NHL and professional sports standards, still fairly young. And the one other thing to note is that if this were to happen, it's reportedly a 2-year NHL deal that they're looking to offer to him. It wouldn't start till next season simply because he cannot leave his team in Sweden until the end of the season.
Right.
So he will have to play out the year there before he potentially returns. But at the end of the day, I mean, I don't mind this deal. He still has some promise. And we also talk about this with leagues overseas. You have to weight the scoring a little bit differently because bigger ice and they're playing a different brand of hockey. So when you see his stat line this year, which puts him third in the SHL of 12 goals and 15 assists in 24 games, that's pretty solid production for that league. So clearly there is some potential here. And scoring 25 goals in 104 AHL games isn't all that bad either. Is he going to come over and immediately be a top prospect? No. But like you said, organizational depth, there's familiarity there with the organization to some extent. Obviously, since he has left, there's different management, there's different coaching staffs, especially at the AHL level. So he may have to get a little bit reacclimated, but this is a player that I think is worth the bet because it fits right into this Kyle Dubas plan. Younger player, has some solid production, looking for a little bit of maybe a second chance, but not really. But there is potential there. And if nothing else, they have his rights and you can see what happens. And the guy clearly has relationships over in the SHL. So if it doesn't work out here, it's not like he's going to become a minor league journeyman. So at the end of the day, it feels very low risk, very high reward for the Penguins.
Right. And I think he's probably going to start in Wilkes-Barre to begin with. I don't think he's going to be just given a job on the NHL main squad after this season. I think they'll try to ease him back in, assuming that this deal goes through. And, you do have that familiarity with Mike Sullivan, who has been here for quite a long time. Kyle Dubas, obviously, knows him quite a bit, going back to his Toronto days too. So it makes sense for the Penguins to be interested in him. And also, again, his production has been pretty solid these last couple of years. And at least in Wilkes-Barre before that, he was producing only a few game sample size at the NHL level. But again, I would assume they'll start him in Wilkes-Barre to try and get his feet wet back, for North American hockey. Pat, is there any other news and notes you want to get to here before we call it a show?
I didn't get a chance to really dive into this, and we'll keep it brief so we don't run long here. But I think an underrated thing that we need to start seeing from the Penguins in the weeks and in games to come is eventually they have got to get Drew O'Connor back on track. He has really struggled mightily. He hasn't scored since October. He hasn't had many points since then. And just everything we spoke about with him in the lead up to this season has really not come to fruition. It looked good the first couple weeks of the year, but it has severely regressed. He's not playing with the same intentionality, I guess would be the word I would go for. He's second guessing decisions. He's not playing with that straight line physicality. He's not being as decisive with the puck. And maybe some of that is just he hasn't been used correctly. But at the end of the day, they have to find a way to get Drew O'Connor going again, because even if you don't want to hold on to him, you clearly viewed him as someone you thought you could get some value for at the trade deadline. And right now, maybe a team takes a bet on potential because he's still young. But right now, there is not a lot there for Drew O'Connor.
Yeah, I think his value after each game right now is continuing to plummet just with the way he's playing. I mean, the thing is, he's getting chances. He's had some glorious chances these last couple of months. A, the puck hasn't gone in the net. There's been some great saves by the opposing netminders. But B, I also feel like at times his forechecking also hasn't been there compared to what we saw last year. I mean, this was someone heading into this year. I thought he was going to potentially go for 20 plus goals this year, especially after what he did last year. So it's really stung to see him just not playing at that same level. Again, he's gotten some really glorious chances. Puck hasn't gone in, and I also think I need to see a little bit more, especially from him forechecking. If he's able to get that goal scoring touchback a little bit, I definitely think he can re-up his value at least a bit to the point where the Penguins can get hopefully something decent back for him at the deadline, because I still think as it stands right now, I don't think he's going to be a Penguin past the trade deadline. But hey, something can always surprise me at this rate. But I think that'll do it for today's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this one. Pat and I will be back with another episode for you all on Friday to recap this game against the Canadiens and get you all set for Penguins Senators on Saturday. So for Patrick Damp, I am Hunter Hodes. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We will talk with you all on Friday.